that a thumbs up?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, fantastic. Look, this is the central question that the Living Future always asks, and in everything that we do, is what does good look like, and not how can we make things a little bit less bad, but really what is the best that we can do in the current circumstances and topology and place that we're in. There's a whole suite of programs, as many of you know, that are under the Living Future banner, but the three that are most where there's been the greatest uptake in our region is the Living Building Challenge for building projects, and zero carbon certification is really taking hold in a huge way, not only in our region but globally, and of course declare the transparency label for materials. So we're going to talk about those today. Just quickly on the Living Building Challenge, we're currently on version 4.1, which was released last year. And it consists, for those that don't know, 7 petals: place, water, energy, health and happiness, materials, equity and beauty. And of course, health and happiness and materials are those that relate very directly to the Declare label that we're talking about today. So I'm just giving a bit of context, and then these are the 20 imperatives that sit under those 7 petals and are required for full certification for a living building, a living certified building, if it's under the Living Building Challenge. So it all works together. And under the materials petal, I think we're all trying to drive the circular economy as a group, and working very hard to make sure that the materials that we use are have a low embodied carbon footprint. But also equally important is building with products that are safe for all species throughout time, and that's really what the materials petal of the Living Building Challenge strives for. And of course, the health and happiness aspect of that is the healthy interior performance, which is emissions of products that are used in our interiors. So the Declare label answers these 3 seemingly very simple questions, but very, very far-reaching, especially when they are to the granular level that Declare requires. And therefore, there's no room for greenwash at all. It's full transparency. It's taking hold quite nicely in our region. We've got 15% of global Declare labels here in our region, most of them Red List free, and 80 active Australian and New Zealand manufacturers, including, of course, Ortech Industries, who's joined us here today to give a perspective, a manufacturer's perspective. This is the database, and of course, all I really wanted to point out here, these are some of the Declare labels in Australia that have embodied carbon on the Declare label. But this is just showing some of the filters that exist on the database. So you can search under Australia, you can search under embodied carbon, and you can, if you do both of them, you get all the Australian labels with embodied carbon disclosure. And really, it's about finding healthier products, and the way to do that is to make the information easily available and transparent. And as I said, we spend a lot of time indoors, so emissions, VOC emissions, formaldehyde, etc., are very vitally important. So reading a Declare label, looking at the top half of the Declare label, apart from the final assembly and life expectancy, end of life, etc., there is this optional embodied carbon disclosure, which manufacturers can choose to do. They need to meet certain criteria, and I'll touch on that in a bit. And of course, when it comes to the ingredients, it's at or above 100 parts per million. So it's everything down to at or above 0.01% of the product, which is incredibly granular, as I said. Some of the data sheets will have something up to 0.1 or something far less granular, and they'll always, a lot of them have a percentage of ingredients that says, oh, don't worry about it, we won't tell you what it is, but just it's non-hazardous, don't worry about it. Unfortunately, we can't rely upon that. We need full transparency to make sure that the products that we specify really are healthy for all species and throughout time. When it comes to the ingredients, the ones that show in red text are on the red list, and those that show in orange are on the watch list. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And what comes into a red list is the result of a collaboration between all the leading organizations globally, and the list is updated annually. Just touching on that embodied carbon, if manufacturers choose to do that, the EPD has to be from a publicly available Type 3 facility, specific or cradle to grave. So it must have C1 to C4 on the EPD, even though what is put onto the declare label in terms of the embodied carbon is A1 to A3, as is standard, but the EPD must include C1 to 4. And Steve will talk a little bit more about that in terms of Durra Panel. The other thing is it obviously has to meet all the the relevant ISO standards. So that is listed out on there too. In terms of the status of the declare label, there are 3 possible statuses. Red list free is if there's 100% disclosure at that very granular level and there's no red list ingredients. Red list approved is if there's at least 99% have been disclosed, and to that very granular level, and it relies on 1 or more approved exceptions. In the case of Durra Panel, it was proprietary ingredients, which is one of the accepted or approved exceptions, as long as it's not more than 1%, and they were well within that. And declared is you must disclose 100% of the ingredients, and it may contain some red list ingredients, and that would get a status of declared. In case of VOC content, that would be in grams per litre for a liquid product. So then you get this very clearly stated on the label, which the compliance status depends on meeting the red list interior performance and responsible sourcing in the case of timber products requirements. So it's those 3 very key materials, petal requirements of the Living Building Challenge. But of course, healthy materials are not just for project teams going for the challenge. It's for everyone who cares about building with healthy materials for all species. So declare obviously very simply distills that all into an easy to read label. And it also means that it's recognised by organisations such as not only LBC, but LEED, WELL, and the Green Building Council of Australia, of course, in terms of their responsible products framework. Now, this little orange logo on a declare label is if it has gone the extra step, the optional step of being third-party verified, which means the manufacturer engages an independent assessor who then verifies all the claims. So just circling back to the red list, because again, I can't stress enough, we all want things to last a long time because that's the right thing to do for low embodied carbon and for the durability and for the circular economy and all that. But really, we need to make sure that what we're using in the first place doesn't contain toxic things. And unfortunately, a lot of the building materials that we build with do. I used to think, well, surely it would have been legislated out if it was that bad. And someone reminded me that it took 61 years for asbestos to be legislated out from when we knew it was bad. So unfortunately, we can't wait for legislation to catch up, and we need to use the science that we already have, which is not only the legacy toxic chemicals, but also regulated but not bad chemicals like formaldehyde. They are all on the red list, and emerging chemicals such as PFAS and others, which are highly toxic. They are unfortunately used in a lot of products that we use to build with. So that's where the red list is handy. It's got the chemical registry numbers of every chemical, so it really has to go by the chemical registry number, not the name. it's the chemical registry number, and that's why it's really important when specifying products to find out the chemical registry number of each ingredient at that granular level, and make sure that it's not on the red list. Red list is free downloadable from the Living Future website, so everybody can check it. That's what it looks like. It literally has all the chemical registry numbers on the left-hand side, the names there, and that's the chemical group that it belongs to. As I said, there's an annual update, and how does that work? So it's like a funnel. There's a watch list. These are things that are under scrutiny. Then it goes on to the priority for red list. Industry gets at least 12 months notice of changes that are coming. And then annually, if all those global leading organizations agree, it gets included on the red list. So that's just a snapshot of the program. It's global, trusted. It's all about transparency, the stringent detail, easy to read, and of course the option to include embodied carbon, which is an added bonus, and one that Ortech Industries have taken up with their declare label for Durra Panel. Which leads me to Steve. I might hand over to you.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Nicola. That's yeah, it was really good, actually. Quite interesting to have sort of the outside perspective and run through declare label and the red list. And I'm so pleased to hear that there's good advocacy for looking for products out there, not just Durra Panel but others that we can use and embrace in our buildings. So no, thanks for that. Yeah, I think one of the little catchphrases we had at Durra Panel is from paddock to panel, and in essence it could be from paddock to panel back to paddock again, because it's red list free and it can be used as soil conditioner or compost at the end of its life. If you want to change the slide there, Nicola. One of the things that makes us really special is that we've been around since 1954, and manufacturing in continuous production in Bendigo, Victoria, since sort of the late 50s, which is really unique. In my experience, we've only just noticed that the sustainability aspect of Durra Panel has been a huge part of upcoming buildings in construction. However, we've just been around for so long, just putting lids on buildings because we were just efficient and modular, and it just made good sense. So a lot of people don't realise that this used to be called ceramic board, and has been around for a very long time. So we're not just a new product that's been cooked up in a lab, and been sustainable. And what makes it unique and innovative is that Durra Panel's made from straw stubble, which is basically the byproduct of cereal grains. And when we think about it on a global perspective, 720 million hectares is grown worldwide with this waste material. Typically, it's burnt after harvest. It's the quickest, easiest way for the farmer to get rid of the stubble. Even in California, they flood the fields, which is not great in drought situations, but also releases methane back into the atmosphere as well, because they don't allow stubble burning. So there's really no real solution in getting rid of this material. And in fact, in India, they have to shut down cities sometimes because the smoke from burning is that bad and actually shortens lifespan, which is very dramatic. But instead of that being burnt off, and what we do in Victoria, this is why we're in Bendigo, we're within 100-kilometre radius of the wheat belt. We purchase it from farmers as well. So we provide a secondary source of income, taking that unwanted stubble and turning it into a Durra Panel. And as soon as it enters into our factory as well, we don't use any glues or chemical binders to make the panel core. We actually use heat and pressure, which extracts the natural lignin content that's in the stubble itself. So we're actually working with nature and the actual materials that nature provides in forming a Durra Panel core. We then encapsulate it in a recycled craft liner that we purchase from Visy. And then we have just a water-based PVA glue liner that just laminates that craft liner to the actual strawboard core to create the stressed skin panel. And it's a pretty cool line there, which the embodied energy of Durra Panel manufacturing is actually 12 times lower than a typical stud and plaster wall. So when we use Durra Panel as a partition walling in offices, it's actually a very efficient and low embodied energy process, which is great. And just working with nature, these are just the great. We're just not sustainable as a product, but sustainable with performance as well. So we're basically renowned worldwide for our acoustic performance. We're not too sure why, but the panel just really performs so well across the whole frequency range. Being so densely compressed, it's actually fire resistant as well. It just carbonizes. Yes, Durra Panel is considered a cellulose-based material and combustible, but similar to mass timber buildings, it just carbonizes and doesn't allow heat to transfer. And in fact, we're doing some research at the moment with CSIRO. We were doing bushfire testing on the panel for using it on external homes in conjunction with RMIT, which is really exciting. We're also here, we're durable as well. And thermally, we're an R value 0.62, but our K value is 0.081. So it takes a very long time for heat to get through. And it's also modular in installation. We make it to order, so we save wastage on site. So whenever we do a project, all the materials made to length to suit the project, so there's minimal wastage. And it's also trafficable. So we're sort of limiting other materials that would usually be incorporated in a construction building because we're trafficable. So no safety mesh. And because there's no safety mesh, there's no need for like thermal spaces either. So we're sustainable in actually minimizing materials in the roof. And just a bit of an example of the projects we've been doing over the last 70 odd years. Every major airport precinct has pretty much got our ceiling systems in it. And who would have think that a lot of these major buildings and convention centres would be, full of straw, but they are. Airports, stadiums, that's Margaret Court Arena. We do a lot of school ceiling projects, defence projects, industrial, and residential is actually where it all began in the 1950s. And we're even finding people coming to us wanting to use, low VOC products in their homes, getting away from gyprock and plasterboard. Film studios is another strange one that's just come about, but for some reason we're building a lot of movie studios in Australia at the moment, and even data centers too. So that's just a bit of an example of all the different projects that we would find Durra Panel specified in. And just a bit of a carbon impact on Durra Panel. So every square metre, 31 kilograms of carbon dioxide is being extracted from the Earth's atmosphere, which is CO2, and 8.5 is stored as carbon with the panel. But it's a cool little fact down the bottom there that it takes 7 acres of straw to build a standard 3-bedroom home, and that straw is renewable every year, compared to a typical stud and plaster one would use about half an acre of a forest, which takes every 30 years to grow. So it's good sort of a reminder to, trees are grown for the purpose of construction, which is often monoculture environments when we look at plantation timbers, where straw is just a readily waste material that's the byproduct of cereal grains, which I think is pretty cool to convert that into, ceiling and wall panels for homes or, commercial buildings. And I think that's probably a bit of a nutshell of what Durra Panel is and what we've been up to since the 1950s. But happy to sort of talk about other things as well. And obviously, we spoke about the C1 to C4 sort of end of life options for Durra Panel. And as I was saying to you, Nicola, today, like Durra Panel is unlike plasterboard. It's not glued or fixed back with glues to stud framework or joists or ceiling trusses. So it's a dry construction material, and it can actually be demounted at the end of life and repurposed. And if it can't be repurposed, it can actually be used as soil conditioner. A good example that we did is actually back in the year 2000 for the Sydney Olympics. We supplied Durra Panel around sort of 10 kilometres of Durra Panel for the media partition walls. And at the end of the Olympics, they put the panels into a mulcher and then spread them over the gardens in Sydney. So that actually, you think back then, that's 25 years ago, we actually had to do a toxicology report back then to state that Durra Panel was safe and non-toxic to go back into the ground as soil conditioner, which we still have that report. Which is it's pretty compelling.
We've got the Queensland Olympics coming up.
Yes, I know about the Queensland Olympics. I'd love
and
to.
a stadium to be built there.
Yes, yeah, quite aware of that. I'm hoping that things are going to start. Well, they'll probably need to start thinking about what materials they're going to be using very soon, I'm hoping.
Yeah, Steve, just that was a great presentation. Just a lot of the uses for the Durra Panel seem to be internal. Is it able to withstand rain or be an external cladding?
Yeah, great question. It can be, yes, but it needs a render to be applied to the face of Durra Panel. So yes, we are an internal product. Durra Panel's recycled kraft liner, so it doesn't like to get wet. However, as I mentioned before, we're working with CSIRO and RMIT where they're wanting to use Durra Panel on the external face of walls for housing in bushfire-prone areas, and that would be finished off with, say, like a cementitious render or a stucco finish, which we have done before, and we've done a couple of projects where it's been used in that application, which with no issue.
Okay. Do you have any distribution centres around the country?
We don't have any distribution centres because the product is made to order. It'd be nice to get to that point because transport, especially for smaller projects around the country, can be quite expensive. Though we do pride ourselves, so if we are doing partition walling, that we can manufacture that panel to the exact length required for the job, so there's minimal cutting on site. Any other questions?
I'll just chip in that, Steve, you mentioned earlier that C1 to C4 was something you already had in your EPD as a standard, that you would always include that anyway, because we get a lot of EPDs presented to us that don't have the end of life included. So that's interesting.
It's a great it's great that we can have that there. There's a lot of different products out there that it's quite difficult to get rid of, especially when they're composite materials and things like that, or there's no buyback options either, as we sort of discussed on the phone. But unfortunately with Durra Panel we don't buy back or be able to sort of take back material because of the made to order component of it. However, we do believe that because it is just dry construction, that our clients can either reuse it and repurpose it, or if it does end up in landfill or compost, it does rapidly degrade in the elements. One of the great end of life options that we have, we actually, another part of the business we do is with Durra Panel is recording studios. So we do a lot of little freestanding recording studios, which often are bought by people renting out large warehouses. So they pop up our little Durra Panel boxes, and whenever they've got to move and their lease runs out, they can actually just pack it down and move it to the next place. And a great example is we did a whole bunch of video editing suites for Fox Studios, and actually set them up in the foyer of their offices because they were doing all the Marvel movies. And as soon as they finished the Marvel movies, they just packed them up and put them at the back of the soundstage ready to be assembled again. So there's great sort of, example of, dry construction where it can be just pulled up and packed up, multiple times. So there's good reuse. It probably lends itself to with a lot of our steel sections because it's not glued into the system. Everything can be demounted and easily, broken apart and just composted or reused. So I think it's great to have a product like that that's not just filled with stud adhesive and glues and all those things.
Steve, can I ask if you have is there much overseas demand? Do you export?
Yeah, funnily enough, we export. Our sealing systems can also be walkable, suspended sealing systems too. So we do a lot of clean room manufacturing environments all over the world. In fact, we export product over to, we've got a project in Greece at the moment, Italy. We've done Jakarta, Indonesia. Obviously, we do a lot of work in New Zealand too. And we're currently talking with, hopefully sort of setting up a plant or a manufacturing plant even in Argentina and America, which is great.
That's great. And so when you say it's made to measure, does the designer send you a CAD design of what they've got in mind, or is it more they send the dimensions and your manufacturing process produces it to a length?
Yeah, so it's a great question too. So sometimes when we do, like, say, a large commercial project like an airport, we generally get a list of panel quantities and dimensions to manufacture from the builder, typically. So not the architect as such, or right down to, if we've got a builder that's putting a partition wall in a home or an office fit out, then you'll measure floor to ceiling, and they can provide the cutting list from that as well. So we just aim to ship everything, ready to go.
Great.
Sorry, I joined a little bit late, so I might have missed this question. How do you actually attach the panels to the studs?
So you can just screw fix it back.
A screw fix, yeah. And then you
Yeah.
take the screws out when you're finished and want to disassemble it.
Correct, yep. So generally, because the panel's really stiff, so it can span on its own from floor to ceiling up to 2.4 meters high. So you only need the fixings top and bottom, which gets concealed by your skirting or cornice. So, and generally, once you peel that cornice or skirting off, then you can remove the Durra panel.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a really good. We're currently working with Princeton University, so they're doing they've got some government funding for a biogenic building that they're currently working on. I went and saw them actually when I was doing a conference in Boston, and they showed me their architectural workshop there, and they were working how to compress straw, and they had this machine that they made and everything with like stuff, and then they just managed to find us, and they're like, oh, hang on, here's this company in Australia that's doing it since 1950s. So we actually sent a whole bunch of cross-cut straw, and they're making this like house out of it, and it's amazing. But they're really into it, and they've done all their research on a lot of sort of plant-based materials that are out there that would typically be wasted. And they said, of all these, straw holds great potential as a building material, as its distinctive qualities can sponsor not only low-carbon material assemblies, but new models of architecture, form and design. And straw sequesters a global amount of carbon equivalent to the emissions of concrete every year, which is crazy.
Wow. Goodness me. So wheat picks by day and building panels at the end of the crop.
Straw buildings by night, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's compelling.
Carry on, Steve.
Oh, sorry, Nicola. I was just saying it's very compelling, some of the stuff that we have here from Princeton, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this project finished later this year, which would be great. It's going to be open for display, and it's in combination with a New York architecture firm called LTL Architects. They've got their own biogenic materials library and everything like that, so it'd be exciting.
Sounds like a good case study for the MECLA website, eh?
Yeah,
certainly does.
Would be too. I might be able to send some of this information too. Sorry, David.
I was going to say, how competitive is it with the non-sustainable alternatives? Do you need a sustainability pull on what they're building in order to use this material, or does it sort of get chosen regardless?
Yeah, well, I draw it back to our history dating to 1950s, where we were just, supplying lids on buildings like convention centres and arenas and, desalination plant. Sustainability was not part of the narrative at all or driver for any of the specification into these projects. And we were purely specified because of an acoustic property our panel holds. And we believe that because we don't actually use any glues or binding agents in our manufacturing process, that we have tiny microscopic air pockets within the panel that help dissipate sound. So it's very favourable for especially low frequency cancellation in the panel. And we're recognised by pretty much all the acoustic engineers, around Australia and the world for that. So yeah, we are very much, competitive compared to traditional building, which would be multiple layers of plasterboard or cement sheet that they'd be screwing and fixing to the ceilings and walls. Contractors visiting the same area, 3 or 4 times, wet trades, painters, where we can just supply the one Durra panel and drop it in the grid. It was very efficient, and that's why I'm really excited, because now we have declare label and the EPD that's we finally have, and we can tell the world that by the way, we can lock away carbon and have great end of life options too.
And anyone who wants to touch and feel Steve's Durra Panel at the symposium coming up in October, the Living Future Institute of Australia's biannual symposium is in October in Sydney. So there's a 2-day event, and the first day is the materials session, and part of that will be bio-based materials. Everyone can get excited about them and touch and feel and discuss all those amazing materials that we have here in Australia that are bio-based.
That's great. When do you have the dates for that, Nicola? I know
2nd and 3rd of October.
Great. Can't wait.
Fantastic. Have we got any more questions on? There are quite a few more people who have dialed in now. Don't be shy, everybody. Come on.
Give you some questions. I can just read some more Princeton Uni facts, which we have here. It's really good. A lot of the stuff they talk about with straw and carbon dioxide sequestering. It's amazing.
Do you have any lead times for these products?
That's a great question too. We do manufacture in Bendigo, Victoria, and we do have lead times, usually because we make to order. So it's generally around sort of, depending on the size of the project, but around sort of 4 weeks when we consider other, things in the production queue. But what's very interesting is the Durra Panel machine can actually manufacture around 800 square meters in a day, which is pretty cool. So, it's especially, ramping up production, using it for, low cost housing or disaster relief. There's so many good applications we could be using, a material like this that, could be composted or reused, rather than sort of, reaching for the standard, foam type panels and, stud and plaster that can't be separated, those sort of things.
Do builders know how to use the material? Is it sort of just easily for your standard builder to stick it in a house?
Yeah, it's very simple. Being around for a long time, there's not too many people that hadn't heard of Stramit board, and sometimes I have to refer back to like, oh, have you heard of Stramit board? And like, oh yes, I've installed that some time ago. But at the end of the day, it's just like a panel. That we manufacture. It's 1187 millimeters wide is how the standard width that we make it to, and that's to fit our 1200 grid centers. But it's really quite simple. Though we are aware that especially in times where construction industry is very tight, not too many people want to take risks on products they haven't worked with before. So we actually now do workshops, once every month on a Friday, and do a barbecue and invite, all the sort of builders around, just get them to touch and feel the product, put a screw through it, hang it on the ceiling, put it on the wall. It's amazing, how many people turn around and go, oh, that was easy. But when you look at it on paper, they're like, Durra Panel, what's this? I haven't worked with it before. How do I price it? So we're working hard to sort of break down that a little bit easier, so we can just make people more comfortable working with, a natural material. And it's great that you don't have to use any sort of masks or anything like that, like you would with, other horrible products that have high silica contents and things like that. Any other questions? I think we're good.
Fantastic. Steve, thank you very much. It was great to hear, Nicola, the combination of the framework, the tool, and how rigorous that is. I think the red list and the fact that you're so far away from that red list, Steve, that is a terrific endorsement. I also like the fact that if people are in Sydney in October, there'll be that chance to, poke a finger at it and have a look at the material. Look, thank you both very much. It always takes time to come up with a presentation, and you've given preparation to this and tag team beforehand. So do appreciate that. As I mentioned, this is being recorded in the background and will be put on our website so that others can learn from this in the future. And I imagine we will include your contact details, so if people want to follow up, I guess through the slides, they can see what was said and what was presented. But for now, look, thank you very much for your time, for the effort that's gone into that. I did love what you said at the beginning, Nicola, about actually what does good look like rather than doing less bad. I think that's, in a world where, the professionals on this call recognise planetary boundaries, but so often we're looking at intensity metrics, and which is really just doing less bad. We do desperately need to get to doing good, and I think that was a fantastic way to start this session and a good point to finish on. So look, thank you very much. Thanks to everybody also for dialing in. Thank you to Alexi behind the scenes on his sick bed, crawling out from under the doona to hit record on this. Thank you, mate, for that. And yeah, to everyone from MECLA, thank you. MECLA works because people collaborate for positive change, and that's what this is all about. So thank you very much. Have a good Thursday afternoon, everybody.
Right.
Thanks, Nicola.
Thanks again,
Thanks,
guys.
Steve. Thanks, Hudson.
So much.
Terrific. Bye-bye.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Thanks.